Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The citadel bells tolled softly in the morning mist, their chimes washing over the rooftops of Old Town like ripples upon still water. Maester Vaegon Targaryen awoke to their sound, as he had for near 40 years. His chamber was narrow and cold, its walls lined with tomes and scrolls stacked high as towers, its window facing the slow-rolling river and the maze of gray rooftops beyond. Once, he had been a prince of the realm, the fourth son of King Jaehaerys the Wise, grandson to dragons, heir to none. But now his hair was thin and white as cobwebs, his hands marked with ink and burn scars from long hours at the Forge of Learning. The chains he wore, forged link by link in pursuit of knowledge, clinked quietly when he rose. Each metal represented mastery over some field: history, medicine, ravens, alchemy, and they had replaced the weight of crowns and swords long ago. That morning began like any other. Vaegon tended to the ravens, dictated letters to novices, and lectured a hall of half-asleep boys on the nature of wildfire. But as he returned to his cell after the midday meal, a boy came running through the cloister, breathless and pale. "A raven for you, Archmaester," the boy stammered. Vaegon frowned. Ravens were rare for him. His family had ceased writing long ago. "From where?" "Dragonstone, Archmaester. The seal bears the three-headed dragon." The old man froze. For a heartbeat, he thought he'd misheard. The Targaryens had not used the Dragonstone seal since the reign of Jaehaerys himself. That wax, black with veins of red, was known to only a handful of men in the realm, most long dead. He dismissed the boy and carried the scroll to his desk, hands trembling despite himself. When he cracked the seal, the wax crumbled as if it had been set a lifetime ago. Inside, written in a cramped, uneven hand, were only a few words. "I know what was hidden at Summerhall. You owe me your life. Come, or all burns again." No name, no signature, yet the words stirred an old memory, one buried so deep he had nearly forgotten it. It had been 30 years ago, when Vaegon was still in service at the Red Keep. A madman, they'd called him. A bastard son of Prince Balon, locked in the dungeons for claiming he saw dragons reborn in fire. That same man had once saved Vaegon from an assassin's dagger meant for another. The fool had been banished soon after. Vaegon had not thought of him since. Now, that same madman seemed to call to him from across the years. For the first time in decades, Vaegon left his scrolls untouched. He spent the day pacing, torn between duty and blood. A Maester serves the realm, not his house. Yet, if there was truth to this, if Summerhall's fire still whispered in the dark, he could not ignore it. By evening, the Archmaesters gathered in the great hall to dine. The smell of roasted duck and onions filled the air, but Vaegon had no appetite. The talk around the table was of harvests, Dornish trade, and the new hand of the king in King's Landing. None of it reached him. His mind was far away, on black stone towers rising over the sea, on dragons long dead, and on a promise whispered by firelight years ago. When the moon rose over Old Town, Vaegon sat by his window, quill in hand. He penned a single letter, sealed with plain wax. It was addressed to the Archmaester's Council, a request for leave of absence, citing private study on matters of historical import. The next morning, as the first light touched the high tower, Vaegon donned his gray robes and the chain that marked his station. His steps echoed down the spiral stairs as he descended to the harbor, where a ship called Sea Moth waited, bound for King's Landing. He carried little: a satchel of scrolls, a raven cage, and an old iron key he had kept since boyhood, forged in the shape of a dragon's head. The sailors did not know who he was. To them, he was only an aged maester on some errand for the citadel. But as the ship slipped down the Honeywine and out into the sunset sea, the city fading behind him, Vaegon Targaryen felt something stir in his chest, something long buried. It was not fear nor regret. It was the faint, dangerous thrill of purpose. The voyage north was slow, the winds unkind, the sea was restless, the clouds heavy with rain. Yet Vaegon spent his days reading, writing, and dreaming. In the dark of night, he would hold the letter and trace its words again and again, wondering if the sender truly lived, or if ghosts had learned to write. On the fifth night, as storms battered the deck, he dreamed of Summerhall. He saw the fire rise again, devouring towers and banners, the screams of princes and queens swallowed by flame. He smelled burning flesh and heard the cry of something vast and winged, born too soon, dying too quickly. When he woke, the deck was quiet, save for the creak of wood and the whisper of the sea. He went above, breathing the cold, salt air. The dawn was pale, and the horizon stretched endless and gray. Ahead lay Dragonstone, jagged against the mist, like the spine of some ancient beast risen from the deep. Vaegon clutched the iron key and murmured a prayer he barely remembered. "Let it be wisdom I find," he said softly, "not madness." But the wind gave no answer, and somewhere on the shore, in the shadow of those black cliffs, a man waited, ragged, half-blind, and smiling at the sea, as though he had known all along that the prince who had once sworn never to return would come again. Rain swept across the sea as the Sea Moth anchored beneath the cliffs of Dragonstone. The waves thundered against black volcanic rock, and above them rose the ancient fortress, its towers carved like dragons, their eyes glowing faintly red in the gloom. Smoke curled from the mouths of stone beasts, as though the island itself still breathed. Vaegon Targaryen stepped ashore beneath a slate sky, the wind tearing at his gray robes. The harbor was nearly deserted. Dragonstone had long been half abandoned, its people scattered. Its lordship passed through hands that no longer cared for the old seat of dragons. Only a few men waited by the pier, silent figures in tattered cloaks, their faces shadowed. A tall man stepped forward, his hair streaked white despite his youth, his eyes wild and bright. "Maester Vaegon," he said, his voice rasping like wind through broken stone. "You came." Vaegon studied him. The years had not been kind. Once, this man had called himself Eamon Waters, though none could say if that was truth. He was the bastard of a bastard, a boy of strange moods and stranger dreams. They had called him the Madman of King's Landing before sending him away. "I came," Vaegon replied evenly, "because you said I owed you my life. Speak your purpose, and quickly. My vows forbid me to meddle in royal affairs." Eamon's lips twitched into a half-smile. "You'll meddle yet. You were born of dragon's blood. The citadel cannot strip that from you." He turned toward the narrow path that climbed the cliffs. "Come, there is much you must see." The climb was long and treacherous. The path wound between obsidian outcrops slick with rain, the air thick with the scent of sulfur. Above them, lightning cracked across the clouds, illuminating the jagged silhouette of the castle. They entered through a side gate that groaned like a dying beast. The corridors within were dim, lit only by guttering torches that cast red shadows upon the walls. The halls were empty, save for the echoes of their footsteps and the distant drip of water. At last, Aemon led him into a great chamber where a massive stone dragon coiled around the pillars, its eyes set with rubies dulled by dust. The fire pit at the center of the hall had been long cold. Upon it rested a single chest of black oak, its surface marked with strange burned sigils. "Summer Hall," Aemon whispered, resting a trembling hand upon the chest. "Do you remember the stories?" Vaegon's heart tightened. I remember the tragedy. I remember my brother's folly." "The fools burned themselves to ash," Aemon said, his gaze distant. "But not all that perished was lost. Something survived, the proof that dragonfire can be born again." He opened the chest. Inside lay fragments of melted metal, a few scorched parchments sealed with wax, and a small black egg no larger than a man's skull. Vaegon stared, speechless. The egg shimmered faintly under the torchlight, its surface rippling like oil. It was warm to the touch. "It cannot be," he breathed. "All the eggs were thought destroyed." Aemon's smile widened. "Not all. I found it among the ruins. The flames took my sight in one eye, but they showed me truth. The blood of the dragon sleeps, Maester, but it dreams of waking. And you can make it so." Vaegon stepped back. "You would have me commit treason. The Citadel forbids such madness." "The Citadel," Aemon spat, "fears what it cannot bind. They chain dragons as they chain men with their books and vows. But your blood remembers the sky." The words cut deep, stirring an ache Vaegon thought long buried. Once, he too had dreamed of dragons. As a boy, he had watched them soar above King's Landing, blazing across the heavens like living fire. He had wept when the last of them died. But years in the Citadel had taught him reason over wonder, truth over legend. And yet, the egg pulsed faintly beneath his hand, as if it had a heartbeat. "Why summon me?" he asked quietly. "What gratitude do you seek?" Aemon's voice softened. "When the assassin came for you in the Red Keep, I stopped him. I took his blade in my arm. You never thanked me. I did not know it was you. I did not do it for thanks. I did it because I saw what would come. The flame showed me your face that night, and it showed me again. You are the one who must bring the dragons back, or see them buried forever." Vaegon's jaw tightened. "You speak of prophecy and madness. You sound like my ancestors before they burned themselves to nothing." "Perhaps madness is the price of truth." Aemon's single eye gleamed. "The world needs dragons again, Maester. Ice gathers in the north, and darkness stirs in the east. The realm will burn or freeze. Without its fire..." Vaegon turned away, shaken. "I will take what you have found to the Citadel. They will study it, test it. No man should wield such power." Aemon's laughter echoed through the hall, raw and bitter. "You will not give it to them. You will hide it. You will guard it. And one day, when the world forgets the name of dragons, you will remember." He stepped closer, his breath harsh and ragged. "Take it. It is yours. My gift. My gratitude." Vaegon hesitated, then lifted the egg from the chest. The warmth bled into his palms, steady and rhythmic, like the beating of a heart. For a moment, he felt the old power stir within him, the blood of Valyria whispering through his veins. Then the torches flickered, and a shadow passed over the dragon's head carved above the door. From the corridor beyond came the faint scrape of boots. Others approaching. Aemon's voice dropped to a hiss. "They followed you, the Maesters, the Hand spies. They will take it from us." He drew a knife from his belt, wild-eyed. "You must go, Vaegon. Take the egg. Hide it." Before Vaegon could speak, the doors burst open. Men in the livery of the crown entered, steel drawn. Their leader shouted, "By order of his grace, no man shall leave this island with relics of Summerhall." Aemon lunged, mad with fury. Swords flashed. Blood spattered the black stone floor. When it was over, Aemon lay gasping at Vaegon's feet, a blade through his chest. The soldiers turned toward the old Maester, but seeing only a scholar and no threat, they left him be. Vaegon knelt beside the dying man. "Why did you do this?" he whispered. Aemon's lips curled in a broken smile. "Because you will remember me now, and because the world must forget." His hand fell away, and his eye went dark. Vaegon sat long beside him as the torches guttered and died, the egg cradled in his arms. When dawn came, he wrapped it in his cloak and fled the island. Behind him, Dragonstone slept once more, its dragons carved in stone watching silently as the last of their kin was carried away by a weary, gray-cloaked prince who no longer knew whether he served wisdom or madness. The wind howled across Blackwater Bay as the sea moth bore south once more. Its timbers groaned beneath the weight of the storm, and the sea frothed like boiling pitch beneath the lightning. In the captain's cabin, Maester Vaegon sat alone, the dragon egg wrapped in thick sailcloth upon his lap. Every time the ship heaved, the egg seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. Sleep eluded him. He could still see Aemon Waters' wild grin, hear his rasping voice whispering of prophecy and fire reborn. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw again that black hall, the blood on the floor, the dying man's final words. The world must forget, and yet Vaegon could not. When the storm passed and the seas calmed, he ordered the ship to Old Town. He told the captain it was for the sake of restocking food and ink for his records, though in truth he needed time to think. He spent the voyage reading the scorched parchments Aemon had kept within the chest. Most were ruined, their words melted into meaningless black trails, but one, half-burned yet legible, caught his eye. It was a letter, written in the fine, flowing hand of King Aegon V himself. The fire must be tamed, not worshipped. If it fails, let none seek it again. The blood of the dragon is not proof against folly. Vaegon read those words over and over. He had been a young man when Summerhall burned. The tragedy had claimed many: Aegon V, Prince Duncan the Small, and scores of loyal men besides. All had perished, chasing the dream of waking dragons from stone. And now, one had returned to him, warm in his hands, its faint heartbeat echoing against the rhythm of the waves. When at last the spires of Old Town appeared upon the horizon, Vaegon's thoughts turned grim. The citadel prized reason above all else. If he returned with the dragon's egg, proof that the fire still slept, they would seize it. They would break it, disprove it, dissolve its mystery until it was nothing but stone and dust. And yet, if he concealed it, he would betray his vows. As the ship moored by the quays, Vaegon made his choice. Under the cover of fog, he left the harbor and climbed the narrow streets toward the high tower. Instead of going to the citadel's main gate, he turned toward the smaller docks beneath the ancient lighthouse. There, beneath a jut of black rock, was a hidden passage known only to the oldest of the order, a forgotten entrance to the catacombs where failed experiments and forbidden relics were stored. Carrying the egg beneath his cloak, he descended the winding stair into the depths. Torches flickered weakly in iron brackets, their flames bending in the drafts. The air grew colder, damper, thick with the smell of mold and dust. He reached a heavy iron door set into the wall, its surface etched with the mark of the Archmaesters, a ring encircling a flame. He pressed his key into the lock. The mechanism turned with a grating sound, and the door swung open to reveal the Hall of Forgotten Things. It was a vast, echoing vault, filled with shelves of relics the Citadel no longer studied. Jars of wildfire sealed in lead, ancient bones wrapped in linen, instruments of Valyrian steel dulled by age. Vaegon moved among them, the sound of his chains faint in the silence. At the far end stood a small alcove, where the floor was lined with cold iron plates. He knelt there, unwrapped the egg, and placed it upon a bed of ash. The black shell gleamed faintly in the torchlight. It seemed to hum, a low vibration that shivered through the stone. For a moment, he thought he heard something within, a faint sigh, like breath. He whispered, "Sleep. Let the world forget," as he wished. But as he turned to leave, a sound echoed through the vault, a soft metallic chime. He froze. From the shadows behind him emerged Archmeister Ebros, his silver ring gleaming in the half-light. "You return from Dragonstone in secrecy, my lord," the old man said. "You bring strange cargo and think no one shall notice?" Vaegon straightened slowly, his hands trembling slightly. "I brought back knowledge. That is all." Ebros's gaze fell upon the egg. His expression hardened. "Knowledge is dangerous when it smells of sorcery." "What is that?" "A relic of Summerhall," Vaegon replied. "A fragment only. It must be studied carefully." Ebros stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You speak of study, but I smell deceit. This is Targaryen folly, not scholarship. Did you forget what your kin's fire did to half the realm?" Vaegon met his eyes. "I forget nothing. I seek only to understand." The Archmeister's face softened, though his tone did not. "Then you understand this, old friend. There are those within the Citadel who would destroy such a thing at once. They whisper that dragons brought only war and madness to men. Some even say that our order helped end them once, long ago." Vaegon said nothing. Ebros sighed and turned away. "You are not the only one with secrets, Vaegon. The realm sleeps peacefully because dragons no longer soar above it. Do not wake them again." With that, he left, his footsteps fading into silence. Vaegon stood motionless for a long while. Then, slowly, he covered the egg once more and sealed it within an iron chest. He carried the chest to the farthest corner of the vault, where ancient tomes and failed inventions lay forgotten beneath layers of dust. There, behind a broken arch, he concealed it and marked the wall with a single sigil, a small flame beneath a dragon's eye. When he rose, his knees ached, and his breath came ragged, but his heart was steady. He left the catacombs before dawn, crossing the bridge back to the Citadel as the first light crept over the Honeywine. The world above was bright and quiet once more, as if no darkness had ever lingered beneath. Days passed. Vaegon returned to his duties, teaching and writing as before. To those who saw him, he was merely an aging scholar, slower now, more withdrawn, but otherwise unchanged. Yet sometimes, when the candles burned low, he would pause and listen, as though expecting to hear the faint hum of something far below the Citadel's stones. Then came the letter. It arrived one evening borne by a raven black as midnight. The seal was unfamiliar, a serpent devouring its own tail. Inside was a single line: "The egg is not alone." Vaegon's blood turned to ice. He read the words again, his hands shaking. If another had survived, if others sought them, then all his silence, all his caution would come to nothing. He looked to the window where the stars hung above the city, cold and clear. Somewhere out there, beyond sea and memory, another spark of fire might be waking. And Vaegon Targaryen, last prince turned Meister, felt the first whisper of dread and wonder stir once more in his heart. The moon hung low over Old Town, veiled in drifting clouds. Maester Vaegon sat alone in his chamber, the letters spread before him, the words etched into his mind. The egg is not alone. He had read them 100 times since the raven arrived, yet their meaning refused to reveal itself. Was it a threat, a warning, or something far darker? He turned the parchment over again and again, searching for a clue, a sigil, a hidden mark. But there was nothing. No seal of the citadel, no trace of wax from any house he knew. The handwriting was jagged, hurried, the ink darker than common black, almost red when it caught the candlelight. The raven that brought it had been strange as well. Its feathers were glossy, too smooth, its eyes a deep crimson rather than brown. The novices whispered that it was no bird at all, but a creature of sorcery, one that should have been burned. Vaegon had silenced them with a word, though his own heart whispered the same fear. By the second night, he could bear the waiting no longer. The message demanded an answer, and if none came to him, he would go in search of one. He left the citadel by the hidden stair that led down to the old river docks, cloaked in gray, his chain tucked beneath his robes. The air was thick with the smell of salt and pitch, and the lamps along the quay flickered weakly in the wind. He moved like a shadow, his mind racing. If there was another egg, another relic of the fire, then someone had stolen it from the ashes of Summerhall. Perhaps more than one had survived, and if so, who guarded them now? A name whispered through his thoughts. Eamon Waters. Could the madman have lied? Could he have hidden others before his death, waiting for some signal to rouse the flame again? The thought chilled him. Madness had ruled that man's heart, yet madness in House Targaryen had never been without purpose. He followed the river's edge to a tavern known as the Sailor's Rest, a haunt for smugglers and sell-sales who traded in relics the citadel forbade. Within, the air was thick with smoke and the sour tang of ale. Men drank, laughed, and gambled at dice, their voices rough and low. Vaegon approached the barkeep, a broad man with a scarred cheek. "I seek passage north," he said, slipping a silver stag onto the counter. "Quiet passage." The man eyed him warily. "North? There's naught there but storms and wrecks." "Still," Vaegon murmured, "I must go." The barkeep considered, then nodded toward a shadowed corner. "There's one might take you. Calls himself Rorik. Don't ask what ship he sails." Vaegon turned and found the man, a lean, sharp-faced sailor with eyes like smoke. When Vaegon gave his request, Rorik only smiled. "A scholar bound north in secret? You've the look of one who's read too much and slept too little. I'll take you, for coin." They left at dawn, aboard a narrow ship that reeked of tar and fish. As the sails filled and Old Town faded behind them, Vaegon felt the familiar ache of uncertainty return. Each voyage seemed to carry him farther from the man he once was, a maester, a servant of learning, and closer to the blood he had sworn to deny. The voyage was long and cold. They skirted the reach and passed the fingers, the seas growing wilder with every league. On the 5th day, Rorik pointed toward the horizon, where a dark headland jutted from the mist. "Shipbreaker Bay," he said, "and there, if rumor speaks true, lies the ruin of Summerhall." Vaegon's breath caught. "Summerhall still stands?" "Half of it. The rest is ghosts and cinders, but men say the ground still smokes when the wind turns west." They anchored in the shallows that night. The ruins loomed above the black cliffs, a tangle of broken stone and twisted trees. No torchlight shone there, no sign of life. Only the faint sound of waves breaking against the shore. Vaegon climbed the cliffs alone, the cold biting through his robes. The path was strewn with shattered marble, the remnants of a place once meant for kings, Summer Hall. He remembered coming there as a boy, its fountains, its tall halls painted with dragons, its air filled with music and laughter. And now only the dead remained. The air smelled of burnt earth and rain. He reached the courtyard where the great hall had once stood. The walls were half collapsed, the floor a mosaic of cracked tiles. In the center lay a pit of scorched stone, wide as a well. A faint warmth rose from it. Vaegon knelt beside the pit, brushing aside the ash. Beneath it, faintly visible, were the remnants of symbols carved into the stone, runes of Valyria, and something else, older still. Then he saw it. A mark burned deep into the rock, shaped like a serpent coiled about a flame. The same mark that had sealed the letter. He drew a sharp breath. Someone had been here recently. A rustle came from behind him. He turned sharply, his heart hammering. A figure stood among the shadows of the ruined archway. A woman cloaked in black, her face hidden beneath a hood. "Who are you?" Vaegon demanded. Her voice was low, steady. "A friend to the fire, if you would be the same." He stepped closer, the torchlight glinting off his chain. "You sent the raven." "I did." She lowered her hood, revealing hair the color of pale gold, her eyes gray as smoke. "I am Lyra of Lees, once a servant of House Targaryen, now a keeper of what your kin sought to destroy." "What do you mean?" She gestured to the pit. "The king's folly did not end here. The fire consumed many, but not all. There were more eggs, 7 in all. Some shattered, some turned to stone. 2 yet remain. 1 you carry, the other has been taken north." Vaegon felt the world tilt around him. "Taken? By whom?" "A brother of your blood," she said. "One who believes the dragons must rise again." The wind howled through the ruins, carrying the hiss of the sea. Vaegon stared into the pit where the fire once burned, the ash swirling around his boots. For a moment, he thought he heard it again, the faint heartbeat from within the egg he'd hidden far away. "Tell me where," he said quietly. "Tell me who." Lyra's eyes gleamed like steel in the torchlight. "You will know him by his madness, as all your line are known." She stepped back into the shadows, her cloak billowing like wings. "Find him, Maester, or the fire will wake on its own." When she was gone, only the storm remained, and Vaegon stood among the ruins, his heart heavy with dread. For the first time in his long life, he wished he had never been born of dragon's blood. The storm broke before dawn, lashing the cliffs of Summerhall with rain and wind that roared like 1,000 lost souls. Vaegon sought shelter beneath the archway of what had once been the royal stables, his torch guttering low. The woman, Lyra of Lys, was gone, vanished into the dark as if she had been no more than a whisper conjured by the wind. Sleep refused him. He sat through the night with his back against the cold stone, his thoughts churning. "A brother of your blood," she had said. But how could that be? His brothers, Aemon, Balon, and their sons, were all dead. No branch of their line remained unaccounted for, save perhaps a few distant kin scattered through the courts of Essos. Yet Vaegon knew too well that Targaryens had always been a secretive breed. Bastards were born, names were changed, bloodlines hidden. There could be another, a man with dragon dreams in his veins, reckless enough to try what had destroyed their ancestors. When morning came, the storm had passed. He descended the cliffs to the shore, where Rorik's ship waited, battered but intact. The smuggler watched him approach with wary eyes. "You've the look of one who's seen ghosts," Rorik muttered. I may have, Vaegon replied, his voice hoarse. We sail north at once. Rorik frowned. North, the seas there are cursed. Even gulls fear them. Then we will have quiet company, Vaegon said, climbing aboard. I will pay double. By midday they were under sail again, the wind sharp and cold. The coast of the Stormlands fell away behind them, and the sea stretched wide and gray. Vaegon stood by the rail, his robes whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. He thought of the woman's words. 2 yet remain. The second egg, taken north. If it were true, he had no choice but to find it. If left in the wrong hands, it could undo all that the Citadel, and perhaps the realm, had fought to preserve. 3 nights passed before they reached the Riverlands. Rorik's crew muttered of ill omens, dead gulls floating on the water, strange lights flickering along the shore. One morning, Vaegon awoke to find a small scorch mark upon the mast, as though lightning had kissed it. But there had been no storm. On the 5th day, they came to rest in the estuary of the Trident. There, among the fog and reeds, lay the crumbling remains of a watchtower, abandoned since the days of Maegor. The locals called it the Broken Spire. It was said to be haunted by men who had once served dragons. Vaegon landed there alone. The air was heavy with mist, the marshland silent save for the croak of frogs. The tower rose crooked against the pale sky, its upper levels collapsed, its gate hanging askew. He pushed through the doorway, his torch casting long shadows upon the walls. Dust lay thick upon the floor, yet recent footprints marred it, bootprints and smaller ones, like those of a child. The air smelled faintly of smoke. At the tower's base, he found a stair descending into darkness. He followed it, step by step, until he reached a low chamber where the walls were lined with melted candles. At its center stood a stone altar, blackened by fire. Upon it lay another egg. This one was pale as moonlight, veined with silver, and faintly glowing from within. A thin trail of smoke curled from a crack along its shell. Vaegon's breath caught. He reached out, trembling. The surface was warm, warmer than the one he had hidden beneath Old Town. It pulsed faintly beneath his fingers, alive with something fierce and ancient. Then a voice echoed from the darkness. I knew the fire would call to you. Vaegon turned sharply. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man in a tattered cloak, his hair silver as starlight, his face gaunt and pale. His eyes burned with a feverish light that Vaegon knew too well. Who are you? He demanded. The man smiled faintly. You know who I am, though you have tried to forget. I am Aelor Waters, born of Baelin's seed, and a mother the realm chose not to remember. My father never named me, but the dragons did. Vaegon's blood ran cold. Aelor died in infancy. I remember the morning. So they told you, Aelor said softly. But I lived, hidden by those who still believed in the dream. The Citadel would have bound me in chains. The crown would have drowned me in silence. So I learned to hide in the ruins and to listen to the whispers that rise from fire. Vaegon's torch flickered as a gust swept through the chamber. You play with forces that killed kings. Kings lacked faith, Aelor replied, but I have seen what they could not. Dragons are not dead. They sleep, and now they stir. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Vaegon. You, uncle, were born of dragon's blood too. You can hear them, can't you, in your dreams? Vaegon shook his head. I hear only ghosts. Ghosts of fire, Aelor murmured, and fire remembers. The egg cracked again, a faint hiss rising from within. Aelor's eyes gleamed. It is waking. I only need a drop of royal blood to feed the flame. He drew a small dagger from his belt. Its blade shimmered with a reddish hue, as though it had been tempered in dragonfire. Vaegon stepped back, horrified. "You mean to spill blood here?" "I mean to restore what was lost," Aelor said. "One life for the return of dragons. That is a small price, uncle." Before Vaegon could speak, Aelor's hand shot out, seizing his wrist. The dagger gleamed in the torchlight. Vaegon struggled, his old strength failing him. The blade nicked his palm, and a drop of blood fell upon the egg. A sound like a sigh filled the chamber. The silver veins of the shell flared, glowing brighter, and a tremor shook the ground. Aelor laughed, a wild, terrible sound. "Do you feel it? It knows your blood." The light grew blinding. Vaegon wrenched free and hurled the torch at the altar. Flames burst upward, swallowing the smoke. The egg pulsed once, twice, and then the light died. When the smoke cleared, Aelor was gone. Only ashes remained where he had stood, and the egg lay still once more, its glow extinguished. Vaegon fell to his knees, coughing. He stared at the remains, the silence pressing in like a weight. He did not know whether the man had burned or fled, but he knew, beyond all doubt, that something had awakened in that chamber. He wrapped the dimmed egg in his cloak, though it no longer felt warm. As he carried it from the ruins, the mist parted before him like a curtain. Outside, the dawn was breaking over the marshes. The air smelled faintly of smoke. Rorik waited by the shore, pale and trembling. "What did you find?" he asked. Vaegon looked toward the rising sun. "Only the past," he said quietly, though his heart told him otherwise. Far behind them, deep within the ruin, a faint sound echoed. A single heartbeat, soft and slow, like embers stirring beneath ash. They fled the riverlands before nightfall, their sails drawn low, the ship sliding through fog as thick as milk. No stars broke through the mist, and the waters beneath seemed to whisper of unseen depths. Vaegon stood by the prow, the egg swaddled in rough cloth at his feet. It no longer glowed, but from time to time he thought he felt it twitch, as though something inside stirred restlessly in its sleep. He could not rid himself of Aelor's face, the burning eyes, the blade, the madness that had gleamed like wildfire in his smile. A brother's son, if truth could be believed. Targaryen blood, lost and forgotten, born only to be consumed by its own flame. The thought left Vaegon hollow. He had spent a lifetime fleeing that legacy, burying himself in books and chains of learning, only to find himself again ensnared by dragon dreams. Rorik watched him warily, keeping his distance. The crew whispered that their passenger was cursed. One of them swore he'd seen light beneath the maester's cloak in the dead of night. Another that the sea had risen strangely calm around the ship, as though afraid to touch it. On the third day, a storm rose from the north. The wind tore at the rigging, and rain lashed the deck. The sea boiled with whitecaps, and the ship pitched so hard that Vaegon had to cling to the railing to stay upright. "7 hells!" Rorik shouted, struggling to keep the tiller straight. "We'll be smashed against the rocks if this keeps." But Vaegon scarcely heard him. In the heart of the storm, he thought he heard something else, a faint cry beneath the wind, like the keening of some vast creature in pain. He turned toward the sound, peering through the rain. For an instant, lightning tore across the sky, and in its flash, he saw a shape moving in the clouds, a shadow vast and winged. Then it was gone. The storm broke as suddenly as it had come. The sea stilled, the wind fell, and the ship drifted under a sky pale and empty. Rorik crossed himself and spat into the water. "Best you tell me, old man," he said, voice low. "What have you brought aboard my ship?" Vaegon's eyes lingered on the bundle at his feet. "Only memory," he said softly. "And memory is a dangerous cargo." They made for Gulltown, the nearest port that would have them. The harbor there was busy with traders and fisherfolk, but even among the noise and clamor, Vaegon felt no ease. He could not stay long. Every day he lingered, he risked the citadel discovering his absence, or worse, the truth of what he carried. He rented a small chamber above a wine shop near the docks. At night, he studied the egg by candlelight, tracing the pale silver veins that wound across its shell. It was cracked, but not broken. Once, he thought he heard a faint sound from within, a sigh, like breath through ash. He dreamed of fire. In his dreams, Summerhall burned again. He saw his father's court wreathed in flame, and at its heart, a man holding an egg to the light. The shell split, and something bright and terrible was born, a creature of smoke and screams, too fierce for the world that sought to birth it. He woke drenched in sweat, the candle guttering low. The egg sat motionless on the table, but the air was warm, as if a fire had just passed through. The next morning, a knock sounded at his door. A boy stood there, no older than 12, his face sharp and watchful. "Letter for the maester," he said, holding out a sealed scroll. The wax bore the mark of the citadel, the chain encircling a flame. Vaegon's stomach turned cold. He broke the seal and read, "Maester Vaegon of House Targaryen, return at once. The council summons you for inquiry regarding matters of forbidden study and unlicensed travel. Your absence has been noted. Your silence will not protect you." It was signed by Archmaester Ebros. Vaegon crumpled the parchment and tossed it into the hearth. Flames licked it to blackness in moments. He could not return now, not while he carried the egg, and the memory of Aelor's death. The citadel would destroy what they did not understand. That night, he left Gulltown by the northern road, disguised beneath a hooded cloak. He traveled light, only his satchel of scrolls and the egg wrapped in wool. His path wound through the vale, over frost-bitten passes and through silent woods. Winter's edge was creeping south, and the nights grew long and cruel. At the mountain village of Redfort, he bartered for a mule and pressed onward. His body ached with age, but his mind burned with questions. Where had Lyra of Lys gone? What had become of the first egg he'd hidden beneath Old Town? And what of Aelor? Had he truly perished, or had the fire spared him as it once had spared dragons in the dawn of days? Each question gnawed at him, and the egg grew heavier with every mile, as though it fed on his doubts. Sometimes, when he made camp beneath the stars, he would find faint frost melting around the bundle, though the night air was bitter cold. One evening, as he rested beside a half-frozen stream, a figure approached from the trees. A rider in black leathers, a hood drawn low. The mule bristled, stamping its hooves. The rider dismounted slowly, hands open, unarmed. "Peace, Meister," a woman's voice said. "You've come far to flee your own blood." Vaegon froze. "Lyra!" She pulled back her hood. Her hair was damp with frost, her expression grave. "You should have gone to Old Town," she said. "They would have locked the truth away." "The truth burns," Vaegon answered. "Locks cannot hold it." "Then you have doomed yourself," she said. "The one you met at the tower, Aelor, he lives. The fire did not claim him. He wanders the north now, gathering those who dream of dragons. The second egg was never meant for you." Vaegon felt the blood drain from his face. "I saw him burn. You saw what he wished you to see." Lyra's eyes gleamed with sorrow. He learned from the red priests of Myre. Fire obeys those who offer it blood and prayer. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He calls himself now the dragon's son. The wild lords of the north listen to him. Even the night's watch has heard his name whispered beyond the wall. Vaegon stared into the dark trees. He means to hatch them. Lyra nodded. And he will, if he finds the one you carry. He believes fire will cleanse the realm of weakness, that dragons will rule again. You must hide it, Vaegon, where neither king nor god may reach. I cannot hide from my blood forever, he murmured. Then hide it from yourself, she said fiercely, or all will burn. A gust swept through the pines, scattering snow from the branches. When Vaegon looked again, she was gone, as silently as she had come. He stood there long after, the words echoing in his mind. Hide it from yourself, and that night, beneath a sky of hard, cold stars, Vaegon Targaryen swore an oath to do just that, even if it meant burying not only the dragon's egg, but the last remnants of who he was. For though he could not see the north beyond the mountains, he felt its pull already, dark, cold, and filled with the promise of fire reborn. The road to the north was a graveyard of old kings and older ghosts. Beyond the veil, the land grew harsh and cold, stripped of color save for the gray of stone and the white of frost. Villages grew smaller, poorer, more silent with each passing mile. The air smelled of pine and smoke, and the night stretched long, filled with distant howls that might have been wolves, or worse. Vaegon rode his mule through it all, hunched against the wind, the egg bound tightly within his pack. Each night he slept less, dreaming only of fire. Sometimes he awoke to find his hands clutching the bundle, as if he feared it would be stolen in his sleep. Other times, he thought he heard it whisper, soft cracks beneath the wool, like embers shifting in a hearth long gone cold. He crossed the neck in secrecy, traveling with traders who carried furs and smoked fish. None knew his name, and he offered none. To them, he was only the Maester, a quiet old man who read by candlelight and paid in silver. Yet one of them, a youth named Harl, spoke often of strange tales. They say the north stirs again, Harl told him one night beside the campfire. A man come out of the snow, silver-haired, with eyes like coals. They call him the dragon's son. He preaches that dragons will rise from ice as well as fire. Vaegon felt his heart twist. A madman's dream, he said softly. Maybe, the boy answered. But madmen have followers. At Winterfell they say he passed near the Barrowlands and left men burning behind him. Whole hamlets gone. They say he walks unharmed through flame. The others muttered prayers to the seven. Vaegon said nothing, but that night, as the fire burned low, he opened his pack and looked at the egg beneath the flickering light. The pale shell seemed to drink the flame's glow. He lives, Vaegon thought, and he seeks this. When they reached Moat Cailin, the traders turned west, but Vaegon pressed on alone. The great fortress loomed like broken teeth jutting from the earth, half sunken in mire. Crows wheeled above the ramparts, their cries echoing through the empty towers. There he found a guide, a woman of the Crannogmen, small and sharp-eyed, who called herself Meha. Her face was painted with mud and ash, her speech thick with the lilt of the swamps. "You seek the north," she said, studying him. "Few southerners return from there." "I seek only a place forgotten," Vaegon replied. "A place of earth and stone, far from men." Meha tilted her head. "You carry something that hums. The frogs grow silent when you pass." Vaegon stiffened. "It is no concern of yours." She smiled, showing teeth filed to points. "Everything that breathes in the neck is my concern, but you pay in silver, and silver buys silence." They rode through the boglands for 3 days, where the air was thick with mist, and the ground swallowed hoof and foot alike. On the fourth morning, they came to firmer soil and the faint outline of the King's Road stretching north through the pines. "The river beyond marks the south's end," Meha said, pointing. "Cross it, and the north will claim you." She turned her mule and vanished into the fog without farewell. Vaegon crossed the river alone. The wind cut sharper there, filled with the scent of snow. Pines whispered overhead, their branches heavy with frost. Each mile carried him farther from the world of men and closer to the one of old magic. He reached Winterfell before the turn of the moon. The great castle stood silent under a shroud of gray sky, its towers steaming faintly from the hot springs beneath. He entered humbly, as a maester might, seeking shelter and knowledge. Lord Rickard Stark was away on a hunt, but his steward, a cautious man named Bernard, received him. "You've come far, Archmaester," the steward said, eyeing the chains around Vaegon's neck. "Few of your order brave these roads." "Age leaves little to lose," Vaegon said. "I seek records, old ones, tales of dragons or of fire in the north." Bernard frowned. "Such tales are rare here. The north remembers wolves, not dragons." Yet he allowed Vaegon access to the library, and there among brittle scrolls and moldy tomes, the old Targaryen found what he sought. A single scrap of parchment, half decayed, written in a hand older than Aegon's conquest. In the days before the wall, when the world was half flame and half frost, there came a serpent of fire to the land of snow. It slept beneath the ice until the stars fell, and men who dreamed of wings called to it by blood and by death. Vaegon's hands shook as he traced the faded lines. A serpent of fire beneath the ice. It could not be mere legend. The second egg, Aelor's egg, must have been taken north, and if this dragon's son truly sought to wake it, then the wall itself might burn. He left Winterfell before dawn, heading farther north. The air grew colder still, his breath turning to mist before him. Days passed without sight of man or beast. The road thinned into a frozen trail, the trees giving way to open tundra. One night, as he made camp beneath a stunted oak, he saw firelight on the horizon, a distant flickering glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. He followed it through the snow until the ground rose before him, forming a low ridge of stone. Atop it burned a pyre. Around it stood a circle of men cloaked in furs, their faces hidden behind iron masks. At their center stood Aelor Waters, alive, his hair gleaming silver in the firelight, his eyes blazing with crimson reflection. "Uncle," he said when Vaegon stepped from the dark, "you followed at last." The men turned. Some held torches, others curved blades. The pyre burned high, casting red light upon something laid atop it, a great white egg, larger than either Vaegon had seen before, its shell veined with faint blue light. Frost clung to its edges even as the fire licked its sides. "Aelor," Vaegon said, voice breaking. "You cannot wake dragons in this place. The North will not suffer it." "The North," Aelor murmured, "has slept too long. Fire must wake it, as fire wakes all things." He spread his arms to the sky. "Do you not feel it, uncle? The world shivers, ice creeps south, and the dead walk behind the wall. Only dragons can stand against that cold." "Dragons will destroy what they save," Vaegon said. "They always have." Aelor smiled sadly. "Perhaps destruction is the only way to begin again." He nodded to his followers. One brought forth a bound man, a prisoner, trembling, his face half hidden by rags. "No!" Vaegon stepped forward. "Do not feed the fire with blood. It is not life it gives, but hunger." Aelor hesitated, then looked to his uncle. "Then give it yours." The old Maester fell silent. The wind wailed over the ridge, scattering sparks into the night. Slowly, Vaegon drew back his sleeve, revealing the faded scar upon his wrist, the mark left by Aelor's dagger at the broken spire. "If my blood ends this madness," he said quietly, "then take it." But before Aelor could move, the earth beneath the pyre shuddered. The fire flared bright blue, and a sound filled the air, low, thunderous, like the beating of colossal wings. The men cried out. Flames shot skyward, devouring the snow. The white egg split with a sound like cracking ice, and from within poured a torrent of steam and light. Aelor's eyes widened in triumph, and then horror. The fire consumed him, his cry lost to the storm. Vaegon staggered back, shielding his face as the pyre collapsed. When the light faded, nothing remained but ash and silence. No dragon rose, no flame burned, only the faint scent of smoke lingered in the frozen air. Vaegon fell to his knees, the snow hissing beneath his tears. He had come seeking knowledge, but found only ruin. As dawn broke, he gathered the ashes of the shattered egg and buried them beneath the snow. Then he turned south once more, walking until the world blurred before his eyes. He would return to Old Town, if he could still call it home, and seal what he had seen where none might ever find it. But behind him, far beyond sight, the snow began to melt in small, steaming pools, and deep beneath the ice, something stirred, something that remembered the warmth of fire and the sound of a maester's heart breaking in the cold. The snows did not cease for 3 days. They fell in silence, thick, heavy flakes that cloaked the north in white mourning. When at last the wind grew tired and the pale sun returned, Maester Vaegon was still walking, leaning upon a staff of pine, his cloak stiff with frost. He left no trail behind him. The snow swallowed every step, as though the land itself sought to erase his passing. He could not remember the last time he had eaten, nor slept, nor spoken a word aloud. The world had narrowed to the crunch of his boots and the distant cry of crows circling above the trees. Each breath burned in his chest, yet still he walked, for south lay the citadel, and with it the last chance to bury what remained of the dragons forever. Sometimes he thought he heard Aelor's voice on the wind, calling through the whirling snow. Sometimes it was his father's, or his brother's, or the ghost of the madman who had first given him the black egg. He tried to silence them, but they followed him all the same, whispering of fire and prophecy. When he reached the King's Road again, it was little more than a white scar across the land. Travelers were rare, only a few hunters and black brothers on their way south. They spared him curious glances but said nothing. A maester's chain, even dulled with frost, still commanded a measure of respect. At a lonely inn near the last river, Vaegon rested at last. The hearth burned low, its light casting red across the floorboards. The innkeep, a stooped woman with one good eye, brought him ale and bread and said nothing when he asked for solitude. He ate slowly, then unwrapped the bundle at his side. The egg he had carried from the broken spire was cracked beyond repair now, its shell dulled to the color of dead bone. Yet it still gave off a faint warmth when he touched it, as if some ember deep within refused to die. "You've come far, old man," a voice said from the corner. Vaegon looked up. A man sat by the window, half shrouded in shadow. He wore black leathers trimmed with fur, and a longsword rested at his side. His face was lean and sharp, his beard white as the snows outside. "I have," Vaegon replied cautiously. The stranger nodded toward the egg. "That's no chicken's treasure you guard there. You're Targaryen, aren't you? I've seen that look before, men who dream of dragons even as the world forgets them." "Dreams are all that remain," Vaegon said quietly, "and they should remain dreams. The man smiled without mirth. "Aye, maybe so. My name is Sir Harwin Frost, once of the Night's Watch, now of no house and no vow. I saw fire in the sky 2 nights past, near the Ghost Hills. Thought it was the end of days, till it faded." Vaegon's heart stilled. What color was the fire? "White," said Harwin, "and cold as death." The words chilled him more than the snow. He had seen fire that burned blue before, Aelor's fire, bright as a dying star. If there was more of it, if something had survived. He thanked the night and left before dawn, following the old man's directions. The Ghost Hills were 3 days' journey west, near where the weeping water met the woods. The road there wound through forests of bare oaks and frozen streams. Each night, the wind wailed through the trees like a choir of ghosts. On the second day, as he crossed a frozen glen, he found signs of fire. Blackened branches, melted snow, and the faint smell of smoke lingering in the cold air. A ring of stones marked a camp long abandoned. In the center lay a brand carved with a serpent coiled about a flame, Aelor's mark. He was not dead. Vaegon fell to his knees beside the ashes. Beneath them, half buried in ice, something gleamed, a shard of shell, white as frost and veined with blue. He brushed it clean with trembling hands. The fragment was warm to the touch, faintly pulsing, so the egg had hatched after all. He rose, heart hammering. The forest around him was silent, too silent. Even the wind had fled. Then came a faint sound, a low, rumbling breath that made the ground tremble. From the shadows between the trees, a shape emerged. At first, he thought it a trick of light, a shimmer of frost, a ripple in the snow. But then it moved again, and he saw it clearly. A creature no larger than a wolf, its body pale as moonlight, its eyes burning with dim blue fire. A dragon. No warmth came from it. Its breath steamed, but not from heat. It was cold, colder than the air around it, freezing the snow where it landed. The creature tilted its head, watching him with eerie calm. "Gods be good," Vaegon whispered. The dragon's gaze held his for a long, silent moment. Then it spread its wings, thin as glass, and leapt skyward. Snow swirled in its wake, and in another heartbeat it was gone, swallowed by the clouds. He stood there long after, the shard still in his hand. The air crackled faintly, as if the world itself had drawn breath. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled, not from storm, but from wings. When he returned to the inn that night, Harwin Frost was gone. Only the innkeep remained, pale and trembling. "Your friend," she whispered. "He left with men from the north. Said they were bound for the wall. They bore banners of black and red flame." Vaegon knew then that Aelor had not perished in fire. He had been reborn in it. The dragon's son was marching north, seeking to claim the last stronghold of the living world, the wall itself. He left the inn before dawn, burdened by a dread he could no longer ignore. The cold dragon had risen, born not of fire, but of the strange union of flame and ice. And if Aelor sought to command it, the realm would know a horror not seen since the doom. Each step south felt heavier than the last. His limbs ached, his breath came ragged, yet he could not turn aside. He had to reach the citadel, to warn them, to seal away what knowledge remained. The roads blurred into snow and shadow. Time slipped from him. He did not know how many days passed before he saw the sea again, gray beneath a lowering sky. Old Town lay far still, a dream half remembered, but he pressed onward. Sometimes when he closed his eyes, he saw the white dragon soaring through storm, its wings cutting the clouds like shards of ice. Other times he saw Aelor walking beside it, his eyes aflame, his laughter echoing across the sky. And in the heart of every vision, he saw himself, old broken, chained by oaths and knowledge, forever the witness to his family's endless dance of fire and madness. When at last he stumbled upon a shepherd's hut by the coast, he collapsed inside, too weak to go farther. The sea roared beyond the dunes, the wind biting through the walls. He unwrapped the cracked egg one final time and set it before the fire. "Sleep," he whispered, voice trembling. "Let the world forget you, as it forgot me." The shell gave no answer. Only the faintest flicker of blue light pulsed within the crack before fading to darkness. Vaegon Targaryen closed his eyes, the sound of waves mingling with the ghosts of dragons in his mind, and far to the north, beneath the endless snow, something vast unfurled its wings and cried out, a sound that was not quite fire nor frost, but both. The echo carried on the wind for miles, and though none could name it, the old gods heard and trembled. The days that followed were fever and memory. The storm outside the shepherd's hut raged without cease, shaking the roof and driving salt through every crack in the boards. Vaegon lay upon a pallet of straw, drifting between waking and dream, his body racked with cold and his mind haunted by fire. Sometimes he thought he was a boy again, sitting in the Red Keep's library, listening to his father's deep voice reading tales of Valeria's glory. Sometimes he saw Summerhall aflame, the sky black with smoke, his brothers screaming as towers fell. And always, at the edge of the dream, there waited a pair of wings, white as bone, vast as the storm. When at last he woke fully, the storm had passed. The sea was calm again, gray and wide beneath a pale dawn. His body trembled from weakness, but the fever had left him. The cracked egg still lay before the hearth, cold and dull, no sign of life remaining within. He sat for a long while, staring at it, until the first rays of sunlight crept across the floor. Then he rose, took up his staff, and stepped outside. The world smelled of rain and salt. Gulls wheeled overhead, and in the distance, he saw the faint outlines of fishing boats moving across the water. Civilization lay not far beyond the dunes. He could reach Old Town by week's end if the roads held. He buried the egg behind the hut, digging with numb hands until the sand swallowed it. When the hole was filled, he pressed his palm against the mound and whispered, "Rest now. No more fire. No more kings." But the words rang hollow, for he knew too well that dragons did not rest forever. He found a fisherman willing to take him south for a few silver stags. The man said little during the voyage, though he cast nervous glances at the maester's chain. Vaegon watched the sea slide by, waves flashing like sheets of steel beneath the sun. At night, he dreamed again. In one dream, he stood atop the wall, wind tearing through his robes, and below him the world burned with cold blue fire. Aelor stood beside him, his face cracked like porcelain, eyes glowing with the light of dying stars. "You cannot stop what has begun," the dream Aelor said. "You only delay the dawn." Vaegon woke with a start. The boat rocked gently in the tide. He stared out across the dark waters and thought he saw a glimmer far off, white fire flickering just beneath the horizon. But when he blinked, it was gone. By the time they reached Old Town, his body was frail, his hair white as salt. The citadel's great tower rose before him, tall and pale in the sun. Bells rang faintly across the city, marking the hour of prayer. The guards at the gates stared as he approached, for he had been gone many months, and rumor had long called him dead. They led him through the archways and courtyards, past the scholars and novices who whispered at his passing. The scent of parchment and smoke filled the air. He was taken to the council chamber of the archmaesters, where the great silver lamps hung from the ceiling, and 100 candles burned in sconces of iron. There they sat, Ebros among them, his face lined but sharp as ever. "Vaegon Targaryen," the Archmaester intoned, "you left the citadel without sanction. You meddled in heretical study and sought powers long forbidden. What say you?" Vaegon bowed his head. "I have nothing to defend," he said softly. "Only a warning to give." Ebros's eyes narrowed. "Speak, then." So Vaegon told them everything: the letter from Dragonstone, the Madman's egg, Aelor's fire, the frozen dragon born beneath the snow. He spoke of Lyra of Lys, of the serpent's sigil, of the dead man who lived, and the ice that burned. He spared nothing, save the location of the buried egg. When he finished, silence filled the hall. At last, one of the younger Archmeisters laughed softly. "A fine tale, my lord. But dragons of frost? A brother returned from flame? You expect men of reason to believe this?" Ebros's gaze lingered on Vaegon. "Whether truth or madness, the tale has ended in ash. The world remains as it was." "No," Vaegon said, and his voice trembled not with age, but with conviction. "The world has changed. Something new has stirred beyond the wall, something born of fire and ice alike. It will not sleep forever." Ebros folded his hands. "Then let it sleep 1,000 years more. Your duty, Maester, is not to prophecy, but to silence. The citadel stands upon knowledge tempered by wisdom. What you have seen is neither." He gestured to 2 novices. "Take him to his cell. Let him rest. Age has broken him." Vaegon made no protest. They led him through the winding halls to a small chamber overlooking the honey wine. The walls were bare save for a single shelf of books, and the window's light fell upon a desk cluttered with parchment and ink. When they left him alone, he sank into the chair and stared out at the city. The bells tolled again in the distance, and ships drifted upon the river like ghosts. He wrote then, through the night and into the dawn. Not letters, not pleas, but history, his own account of what had come to pass. He wrote of Aelor and the eggs, of the white dragon's birth, of the madness that forever stalked his blood. And at the end of it, he added one final line: "If knowledge is a flame, then wisdom is knowing when to let it die." He sealed the pages in wax and hid them deep within the vaults, where only the most curious of scholars might find them one day. Years passed. His hair thinned, his sight dimmed. The world moved on. Kings rose and fell, and dragons remained dead. Or so men believed. On a spring morning, many years later, a novice entered his chamber to bring him wine and found him slumped over his desk, the chain of the Meisters glinting faintly in the sun. He looked peaceful, as if merely sleeping. When they prepared his body for burial, they found a small object wrapped in cloth clutched to his chest, a shard of pale shell, smooth as glass. They buried him beneath the citadel with the other Archmeisters, and none spoke his name beyond the walls. Yet some nights, when the wind swept in from the sea, the novices swore they heard a sound from the depths below, a faint beating, soft as wings in distant air. And in the far north, beyond the wall and the endless snow, shepherds whispered of strange lights that danced upon the ice, white and cold, as if the stars themselves were waking. Winter had returned to Westeros in truth. The snows that came with the turning of that year did not melt when the spring winds blew. They clung to the earth like a promise. And though Maester Vaegon Targaryen lay long dead beneath the citadel, his tale did not end there. Years turned to decades, and the memory of the old Maester faded, like all memories do when the world grows hungry for new kings and new wars. Only a few dusty scrolls bore his name, and fewer still remembered the strange stories he had whispered of dragons born of frost. Yet the world has a way of remembering what men wish forgotten. It began far to the north, beyond the wall, where even the Night's Watch no longer dared to patrol. There, among the endless snowfields and frozen rivers, the free folk told tales by firelight of a pale dragon that hunted in silence. It flew beneath the moon, they said, and its breath froze the blood of men before they could scream. Most thought these the lies of drunkards and fools, until the traders from Hardhome came south, bringing with them shards of ice that glowed faintly blue. By then, Old Town had a new archmeister, Bernard, a cautious and pious man who scorned the wild notions of his predecessor. When he heard the tales, he sent a single novice north to record them, more to quiet gossip than from belief. The novice's name was Raymond Flowers, a bastard of Hightower blood, young and eager for glory. Raymond traveled with a company of knights as far as Winterfell, where Lord Cregan Stark, old but still sharp-eyed, warned him not to go farther. "The wall holds back more than wind and snow," the Lord of Winterfell said. "Leave the dead to their silence." But the boy was headstrong. He pressed on, reaching Castle Black as the first true storms of winter closed the passes. There he found the Watch little more than a shadow of what it had once been. 50 men, gaunt and weary, their Lord Commander an aged veteran who had seen too many winters. "You seek monsters," the old commander said when Raymond declared his purpose. "You'll find none worth your ink, only wind and cold and the ghosts of better men." Still, the boy begged leave to go beyond the wall, and the commander, half amused, half pitying, granted it, sending with him 2 rangers to keep him from dying within a mile of the gate. They rode out beneath a pale sun. The world beyond was vast and white, a wilderness of frozen rivers and whispering trees. For days they saw nothing but snow hares and shadow cats. Then, one night, as they camped beside the ruins of an old watchtower, Raymond woke to a sound that made his blood run cold. It was not the howl of wolves. It was a deep, throbbing beat, slow, steady, and immense, as though the heart of the earth itself had begun to stir. The rangers heard it too. "Wind in the stones," one muttered, but his voice shook. Raymond stepped outside the camp, staring into the endless dark. The moon hung low, its light breaking against the snow like silver fire. And there, high above the frozen treetops, something moved, a shadow, vast and winged, passing across the face of the moon. He fell to his knees, his heart hammering. For a moment, the creature circled, the air shimmering around it like heat, though the cold bit deep enough to burn. Then it turned north and vanished into the clouds. The rangers refused to follow farther, but Raymond pressed on alone, drawn by a pull he could not name. He walked until his strength failed, until the wind carved ice from his breath. At last, he came upon a valley cut deep into the earth, and at its heart, a mound of snow that glowed faintly blue. He dug with his bare hands, and beneath the frost he found stone. No, not stone. Scales, pale, smooth, and cold as death. When he touched them, the world went dark. He awoke days later in Castle Black, fevered and frostbitten, the rangers who had abandoned him now claiming they had found him wandering half-mad upon the ice. He could remember little, save a whisper in his dreams, an old man's voice saying, "Let the world forget." But the world would not. Raymond returned to Old Town that spring, limping and pale, bearing a single relic, a shard of glassy scale, faintly veined with silver. He presented it to the archmeisters, who dismissed it as frozen salt or sea glass. Only one man, a gray-haired archmeister named Ethon, lingered over the shard long after the council had gone. He recognized the sigil scratched faintly into its surface, a dragon's eye above a single flame, the mark of Vaegon Targaryen. That night, Ethan descended into the vaults where the forgotten relics of centuries slept. He searched through the shelves and found a small, sealed chest bearing Vaegon's name. Inside lay the old Meister's writings, pages yellowed and ink faded, but still legible. He read through them until dawn, his hands trembling as the story unfolded. The mad Prince Aelor, the frozen egg, the creature born of both fire and ice. When morning came, Ethan locked the scrolls away again, but the words burned in his mind. He ordered Raymond brought to him. "Where you went? Did you hear wings?" he asked softly. Raymond hesitated. "I saw something. I cannot say what, but it saw me." Ethan leaned forward. "And did it speak?" The boy's eyes grew distant. "In my dreams," he whispered. "It said the blood remembers. It said the fire sleeps beneath the ice." After that, Raymond grew restless. Within a month he was gone again, vanished from Old Town without a trace. Some said he took ship for Eastwatch, others that he went to seek the dragons of Old Valyria. None ever saw him again. Ethan lived another 10 years, but he never forgot the boy's words. In his final days, he sealed Vaegon's writings and the shard together in a lead coffer, inscribed with a single warning: "Let this knowledge perish. The gratitude of Madman is never spent." When he died, the citadel buried him beside Vaegon. The coffer was placed deep within the vault, behind locks that no novice dared open. Yet knowledge, like fire, does not sleep forever. A century later, when a young Targaryen queen came to Old Town seeking counsel on dragons, a novice was sent to fetch old scrolls from the vault. His lantern light fell upon the coffer's seal, and the wax cracked beneath his trembling fingers. He opened it. Inside, the shard still pulsed faintly with pale light, and in that light, for an instant, the novice thought he saw the shadow of wings stretching across the walls of the citadel, vast, cold, and endless. Far to the north, thunder rolled once more across the ice. The boy who broke the seal was named Corwin Tyne, the youngest son of a minor lord of the Vale, sent to the citadel to earn a chain instead of a sword. He was clever, curious, and proud of it, qualities that had lifted him quickly through the ranks of novices and would one day damn him. The vault's air was still and cold, heavy with the dust of centuries. Corwin held the cracked coffer in both hands, marveling at the craftsmanship, the black iron bands, the runes half-eaten by time. When the wax gave way, the faint glow within startled him. He lifted the lid. Inside lay a shard, smooth as glass, cold as winter even through the thick cloth that wrapped it. Faint light pulsed within, blue, then white, like a heartbeat glimpsed through frost. Beneath it were pages, brittle and ink-stained, the first lines written in a hand long dead. The world is a wheel of flame and snow. Between them stands the heart of man, forever torn between madness and mercy. Corwin frowned. The signature at the bottom read, Vaegon Targaryen. He had heard the name only in passing, the maester who renounced his crown and vanished from record. Some said mad, others wise beyond men. None had told him that Vaegon's writings still survived. A faint wind sighed through the vault. The candles flickered. He thought he heard wings, or perhaps only the groan of stone settling. He told himself it was imagination and carried the coffer upstairs to his chamber. There, under the weak light of dawn, he read. Vaegon's words were unlike any maesters he had known, more confession than chronicle, filled with despair and fire, with names lost to history. Aelor Waters, Lyra of Lys, the dragon's son. The tale unfolded like fever, each page darker than the last, and at the end, a final warning written in shaking hand. If the flame sleeps beneath the ice, let no man seek to wake it, for the gratitude of madmen is bought with blood, and the world will pay it in full. Corwin closed the book. His heart thudded in his chest. He could almost feel the words humming in the air, alive with secret power. He turned to the shard. In the candlelight, it seemed to pulse again, faint but steady. When he held it closer, frost spread along his fingers. The cold bit deep, yet he did not drop it. There was something within that cold, a whisper, low and distant, like the murmur of the sea. He thought he heard a voice. "Remember me." The shard slipped from his grasp. It struck the floor and did not shatter. Instead, light bled from the cracks in the stone, thin as hairlines, winding across the floor like veins of silver. The air turned sharp, the fire in the hearth dying with a hiss. Corwin stumbled back, heart pounding. Then, just as suddenly, the glow faded. The vault fell silent once more. When he stooped to retrieve the shard, it was lifeless again, pale, cold, and inert. He might have gone then to the Archmeisters, confessed what he'd done, begged their counsel. But curiosity ruled him, as it always had. He bound the shard in cloth, sealed the coffer again, and said nothing. That night, he dreamed. He stood on a frozen plain beneath a sky of red stars. A river of fire cut through the ice, and on its far bank stood an old man robed in gray, his chain glinting faintly. Vaegon Targaryen. The old Maester's eyes were white and blind, but they turned toward him all the same. "You opened the gate," he said. "Why?" "I meant no harm," Corwin stammered. "I only wanted to know." "Knowledge is the kindest name for hunger," Vaegon said, "and hunger is the oldest sin. The flame beneath the ice remembers its debt." The river surged higher, flames licking at the frozen banks. From the depths rose shapes, half seen, vast and winged, their scales glimmering like shards of moonlight. Corwin reached for the maester, but Vaegon stepped back, fading into mist. "When the flame and frost meet again, remember this: dragons were never meant to wake." The dream shattered in fire and snow. He woke gasping, the sheets damp with sweat. Outside, thunder rolled above Old Town, though the sky was clear. He went to the window and looked toward the sea. Far off, he saw lightning flash over the water, pale blue, not white. He told himself it was only a storm, but over the following days, strange things stirred within the citadel. The ravens grew restless, clawing at their cages. Glass candles, long cold, flickered with faint light. Apprentices whispered of voices heard at the edge of hearing, calling names no living tongue should know. Corwin felt the pull growing stronger. He would try to focus on his studies, yet his thoughts always returned to the shard hidden beneath his bed. He began to dream again, of fire swirling beneath the sea, of dragons sleeping under glass, of a voice whispering, "Set us free." At last, he could bear it no longer. One night, when the moon was high, he descended again into the vaults. He carried with him a lamp, the coffer, and his own trembling resolve. He placed the shard upon the stone floor and poured a thin circle of salt around it, as he had read in Valyrian texts of warding. Then he whispered the words carved upon the coffer's lid. "Let this knowledge perish." The light within the shard flared to life. The floor groaned. Frost spread outward in a ring, then melted at once into steam. A shadow coiled above the light, vague, winged, immense, and from within it came a sound that was not quite a roar and not quite a cry, a sound of longing, of fury, of awakening. Corwin fell to his knees. The lamp shattered, plunging the vault into darkness. When morning came, the novices found the vault door frozen shut, frost creeping up the walls of the citadel like veins. It took 12 men and a forge's heat to open it. Inside, they found the coffer split in two, the shard gone, and the floor cracked as if something vast had pressed against it from below. Of Corwin Tyne, there was no sign. Only a circle of frost burned into the stone, shaped like a dragon's eye. The Archmeisters sealed the vault and forbade its mention, swearing all who had seen it to silence. But that winter, ships in the harbor spoke of lights beneath the sea, white fires rising and falling in the depths as if the ocean itself were breathing. And in the far north, beneath skies of endless snow, the wildlings said they saw a pale shape flying against the stars, its wings so wide they blotted out the moon. The old men shook their heads and called it folly, but the free folk gave it a name. They called it Vaegon's ghost. Spring never truly came to the realm that year. The maesters wrote of strange winds that swept from the north, cold even in the reach, and of nights when the stars flickered like dying candles. Crops failed along the Mander. Shepherds in the stormlands found their flocks frozen stiff beneath clear skies. Yet the lords of Westeros were slow to listen. They had grown weary of old omens and older fears. In Old Town, where the high tower's shadow stretched across the harbor, whispers still clung to the citadel like fog. The vault beneath the foundations remained sealed, yet frost gathered on its doors no matter how fiercely the forges burned. The Archmeisters forbade the novices from speaking of the vanished Corwin Tyne, but silence never lasts where fear has taken root. They called the frost the Master's curse. A decade passed, and the story should have died as all tales do. But then came the night the sea turned to glass. The sailors of the Mermaid Song swore that as they sailed the summer sea, a pale light bloomed beneath the waves, soft and blue, rippling through the dark like fire seen through smoke. Then came a great shadow, moving fast, vast enough to blot out the moon. When it passed, the sea steamed and their hull froze from keel to deck, though the air was warm as summer. Only one man survived, a half-drowned oarsman dragged ashore days later by fishermen of the Arbor. He was raving with fever, his eyes glassy with terror. "Wings," he kept saying, "wings of frost and a face like a man's, old and white, with eyes of fire." Word reached the citadel soon after. Archmeister Ellard, who held the ring and rod of prophecy, summoned a conclave. The Archmeisters gathered in the upper chamber beneath the tower's great dome. There, amid the candles and the sound of the river below, they argued through the night. "Ghost stories," said one. "Omens," said another. "Echoes of the doom," muttered Ellard. Only Ethan's successor, Maester Lomas, a quiet man who had been Corwin Tyne's friend, spoke little. He listened, his fingers tapping softly on the table, his eyes fixed upon the frost creeping down from the window's edge. When the debate ended in indecision, Lomas returned to his chambers and began to read the old records again. Vaegon's writings, Ethan's notes, even fragments of the lost chronicles of Dragonstone. Each told the same story in different words, that fire and ice bound together could not sleep forever. He wrote one letter before dawn and sent it north by Raven, addressed to Winterfell. The letter found Lady Alara Stark, granddaughter of Lord Cregan, known for her sharp wit and colder temper. She read it twice and said nothing for a long time. Then she called for her Maester. "Tell me, Maester Oren," she said, "what do you know of dragons that breathe frost?" "Nothing, my lady," he replied, uneasy. "Such things are tales to frighten children." "Then the maesters of Old Town are frightened children," she said, "for one of them begs for our aid." Within a fortnight, Alara rode for the wall with 30 men and her bastard half-brother, Jory Snow, at her side. The watch received them warily. The Lord Commander, aged and wary, still remembered tales of Vaegon's blood. "You seek ghosts," he told her. "We have enough of those here already." "Then one more will not trouble you," she said. They climbed the wall at dawn, the wind biting sharp as knives. From the top, Alara gazed northward, and for a moment she saw only snow and shadow. Then, far upon the horizon, a flicker, a single pulse of blue-white light. "What is that?" she asked. "Stormlight, perhaps," said Jory, though his voice trembled. That night, the light returned, brighter now, moving closer, like the flare of some distant beacon. Then came the sound, low and deep, a heartbeat that shook the ice beneath their feet. The men of the watch crossed themselves. Alara only stared, her face pale and hard. When morning came, she descended to the castle and wrote her answer to Maester Lomas. "Your fears were not in vain. The North remembers the dead, and something dead remembers us. The raven never returned." Winterfell waited through that long, strange season, but no more word came from the wall. When traders next reached the castle months later, they told of storms that moved against the wind, of lightning that burned white, of watchers who vanished from their posts, leaving only frost where they stood. The wall itself glowed faintly, they said, as though lit from within. Meanwhile, in Old Town, Maester Lomas vanished from his chambers without trace. His desk was found open, ink still wet upon the parchment. The final words he had written read, "They are waking. The blood remembers." Soon after, the frost upon the vault doors melted, leaving only a thin crack through which poured a cold mist. Novices swore they heard breathing within, like the slow exhalation of some sleeping beast. And one night, when the moon hung red above the high tower, the bells rang though no man pulled the ropes. The sea surged without wind, and from the harbor rose a column of steam that glowed faintly blue before vanishing into the clouds. The archmeisters barred the lower halls and forbade the speaking of Vaegon's name, yet the fear lingered. In the taverns of Old Town, sailors told of new stars seen above the northern seas, moving stars that came and went, trailing pale light like the breath of winter. Shepherds in the riverlands woke to find their flocks frozen where they stood. And across the realm, from Dorne to the Vale, men dreamed of wings, vast and white and soundless. A boy in King's Landing swore he saw one circle the Red Keep at dawn, its shadow passing over the city like a storm cloud. When he tried to speak of it, his tongue blackened and split. The maesters called these things coincidence, as they always did. But in the north, beneath the endless sky, the free folk told another tale. They said the frost dragon had come again, bearing upon its back a rider cloaked in gray. His eyes burned with fire that gave no warmth, and in his hand he held a staff of black iron bound with silver links. They called him the Mad Meister, and his coming heralded a winter that would never end. And so the legend of Vaegon Targaryen lived on, not in scroll or song, but in the cold wind that swept from the north, whispering through the trees, across the rivers and fields, down to the sea. Mercy is a kind of madness, too, it seemed to whisper, and men who heard it shuddered, though none could say why. The realm had forgotten dragons of flesh, but it could not escape dragons of rumor. Years after the last frost firestorm rolled down from the north, men still whispered of it in the corners of taverns or beside dying hearths. They told of an unseen rider who crossed the skies in silence, and of a pale shape that breathed cold flame upon the sea. Lords laughed, septons prayed, and maesters wrote that fear was a sickness that spread faster than plague. Yet fear remained. By then, a new king sat the Iron Throne, one who ruled with peace in his mouth and steel in his heart. King Baelor the Blessed's line was long spent, and the Targaryen name carried more shadow than fire. The dragons were gone, the Iron Throne cold, and the Citadel's word carried greater weight than any crowns. The king's maester, old Maester Dennis, was a learned man who scorned superstition. But even he could not explain the sudden chill that haunted the Red Keep at night, nor the sound of wings that sometimes echoed through its highest towers. One night, Dennis dreamt of Vaegon. He saw him standing in a hall of stone, his maester's chain frozen stiff around his neck. Snow fell through the roof above, yet no wind stirred it. The old prince looked at him with eyes like pale embers and said, "Tell the king the debt is not yet paid." Dennis woke, gasping, sweat freezing on his skin. He wrote the dream down in a trembling hand, though he did not know why. That same week, ravens stopped coming from the north. Winterfell's birds vanished first, then Deepwood Motte, then the Shadow Tower. Only Eastwatch still sent word, and its letters grew stranger with each passing moon. The final message was short. The sky glows, the sea smokes, the ice sings. After that, silence. The king sent riders north, but none returned. The snows deepened, creeping past the neck, swallowing villages whole. The maesters blamed the season, yet the people spoke of darker things. Blue lights moving beneath the snow, whispers that crept through cracks in the walls. In the citadel, the frost returned to the vault doors. This time, it spread beyond them. It crept up the stairwells, along the iron rails, into the halls where novices studied their lessons. At night, the frost shimmered faintly, as if lit from within. The archmaesters forbade any mention of it. They ordered fires stoked day and night, though none could melt the ice that bloomed anew each dawn. Then, one morning, the great bell atop the high tower rang by itself. The city woke to find the harbor frozen solid, a sheet of ice stretching out to sea as far as the eye could see. And upon that frozen plain, men saw shapes moving. At first, they thought them ships trapped in the frost, but ships did not move against the wind, nor did they shine with pale light. The fishermen swore they saw wings, vast and thin as glass, rising and falling upon the ice. The next night, a storm rolled in from the west. Lightning danced white over the sea, and thunder shook the stones of Old Town. But when the storm passed, the ice remained, unbroken. Within the citadel, Archmaester Dennis called another council. "This is no winter's work," he said. "Something stirs beneath the sea. The signs are as Vaegon wrote." "Vaegon wrote madness," another hissed. "You give too much weight to ghosts." "Ghosts?" Dennis turned on him. "The frost speaks if you dare to listen. The vault breathes. Would you call that ghostly?" They argued until the candles burned low, and in the end, they decided to do nothing. They were maesters, after all, sworn to study, not to believe. That night, Dennis walked alone to the vault. He found the great doors half open, frost smoking from the gap. The air beyond shimmered like moonlight through water. He stepped inside. The chamber was no longer empty. The coffer that once held Vaegon's writings stood open in the center, rimed with ice. The air hummed softly, and beneath the floor, something moved. He knelt and brushed aside the frost. The stone beneath was cracked, and within the crack glimmered light, blue and white, flickering like a pulse, a heartbeat. He stumbled back, his breath misting in the cold. Then a voice echoed through the chamber, low and distant. The fire sleeps beneath the ice. The blood remembers. The walls groaned. Frost climbed higher, sealing the doors behind him. Dennis raised his lamp, but the flame died at once. The darkness thickened, alive with whispering. He saw faces then, faint, fleeting. Ethan, Corwin Tyne, and finally Vaegon himself, his pale eyes burning in the gloom. "You should have let us rest," the spirit murmured. Dennis tried to speak, but his voice froze in his throat. The frost surged up his legs, over his chest, across his chain. The cold was not cruel. It was gentle, like sleep. As it reached his heart, he felt it stop, and then start again, beating in rhythm with the pulse below. When the novices found him the next morning, he sat motionless beside the coffer, encased in ice, a faint blue light shining behind his eyes. They fled screaming. The archmaesters sealed the vault once more and swore the citadel to silence. But silence cannot bind the wind. Ships along the coast began to vanish. The towns of the Reach awoke to find their wells frozen and their livestock dead without wound. The frost crept farther inland each day. Then came the first sighting in the south. A farmer near Tumbleton claimed he saw it at dawn, a dragon of ice and light gliding over the fields in silence, its wings stirring the frost, but not the air. Upon its back rode a figure in gray robes, a chain gleaming faintly across his chest. The farmer ran until his lungs burst, crying that winter had grown wings. Others soon swore the same. A maester's ghost, they said, flying upon a frost-born worm, its breath freezing the rivers as it passed. In the Stormlands, they called it the White Flame. In Dorne, the Silent Dragon. In the north, simply Vaegon's Reckoning. The king sent his fleet to hunt it, but the ships never returned. The sailors of Lys claimed they saw a storm of mist sweep south across the sea, and within it, a pale shape that blotted out the sun. By year's end, the snows fell even in Dorne. The red mountains gleamed white, and the great rivers of the Reach turned to glass. Old Town's harbor froze solid once more, and this time it did not thaw. From the high tower, the bells tolled endlessly, ringing without hands. And one night, the people of the city looked up to see a shadow pass across the moon, vast, silent, and shimmering with pale fire. Some fell to their knees, believing they saw a god. Others wept, knowing they saw a curse. Far above, on wings of frost, the figure in gray gazed down upon the realm of men. No breath fogged the air before him. His eyes burned like cold stars. When he spoke, his voice was soft as snow. "Mercy," he said, "is a kind of madness." Then he and his dragon turned north again, vanishing into the endless dark where winter waited. And below, in the cities of men, the world began to freeze. Years passed, though the seasons no longer changed. Men forgot the warmth of summer, for the snows never left the fields, and rivers that once fed the realm had turned to frozen roads of glass. Kings burned their thrones for heat. Lords sent prayers to gods that had gone silent. The maesters wrote of famine, pestilence, and strange lights that drifted above the ruins of cities long dead. Yet even in despair, they whispered of one name, the ghost that ruled the sky. They said he came with the storms, a shadow vast as mountains, whose breath was cold fire and whose eyes gleamed like frozen suns. Some called him the White King, others the Maester of Madness, but the oldest among them remembered another name, Vaegon Targaryen, son of Jaehaerys the Wise, once the meekest of dragons. If any still lived in Old Town, They hid behind the walls of the citadel, for the sea that once lapped at its harbor now lay sealed beneath leagues of ice. The high tower stood half buried, its uppermost light burning a dull blue, as if frozen flame had taken root in the stone. Within its halls, a single figure moved, a woman wrapped in furs, her hair streaked white by frost. Her name was Mara Hightower, last keeper of the records, descendant of stewards who had once tended the lamps of the Meisters. She alone still tended the vaults, though the citadel above had fallen silent many winters past. By her dim torch, she descended the endless stairs into the frost-bound depths, where the old vault door waited, split and rimed with ice, the crack in its face glowing faintly from within. She carried a bundle beneath her cloak, parchments gathered from broken shelves, the last writings of men who had sought to understand the end. When she reached the vault, she knelt before the gap. Cold air breathed through, whispering like a living thing. "I have come to see him," she said, her voice hoarse. The breath of the vault grew stronger, swirling her torch. Then, slowly, the light within brightened until she could see the figure beyond. A man seated upon a throne of crystal and frost. His face was pale as moonstone, his eyes two stars of frozen fire. Around his neck hung the chain of a Meister, each link sheathed in ice. "Vaegon," she whispered. He looked upon her as one might upon a shadow of a memory. When he spoke, the words were soft and cold. "You know my name. I know your story," she answered. "It is written in every ruin, every dead river. You are the beginning of this winter. Then you know," he said, "why it cannot end." She stepped closer, the ice beneath her feet cracking. "You were a Meister once. You served wisdom. Why do you serve death now?" "I served knowledge," he said. "And knowledge is a flame. When men forget it, they freeze. I gave them fire once, and they burned themselves to ash. I give them frost now, that they may sleep instead." Mara's torch sputtered. "Sleep is no mercy. It is all I have left to give." She drew forth the bundle of parchments, laying them before him. "The world remembers your mercy in its ruins, but I have come for truth. You were not always this. There must be something left of the man who sought peace." Vaegon's gaze dimmed, the blue light within him flickering. "Peace," he said softly. "I sought it in the citadel's chains, in the silence of study, in the stillness of death. But peace is a lie men tell themselves to forget the fire in their blood." He rose. The frost around his throne cracked and fell in shards. "You should go. The flame beneath the ice stirs again." Mara did not move. "Then tell me, before it wakes, what debt do you still owe this world?" He paused. When he spoke, his voice was almost human again. "The debt of gratitude," he said. "A madman once saved my life. In doing so, he doomed me to remember what dragons were. I tried to bury that gift in wisdom. The world dug it up again. The gratitude of the madman is endless. It consumes everything it touches." The air shook with distant thunder. Above, the tower groaned, its light flickering. Mara pressed forward, the cold biting through her boots. "If there is still a debt, then let me bear it. End this winter, and I will take your curse." Vaegon regarded her for a long moment. "You would take the madness of dragons into your heart?" "I would take anything that ends this night." The light within him grew brighter, filling the vault with a pale glow. "So be it." He reached out a hand of ice and placed it upon her brow. Cold seared through her skull, and she screamed. But the scream was short, for in that instant, memory poured into her. 1,000 years of fire, the birth and death of dragons, the cry of the first and last hatchling, the endless hunger of knowledge and power. When she opened her eyes again, Vaegon was gone. Only the empty throne remained, and in its place, her torch burned brighter than before, its flame pure white, its heat sharp as truth. She rose, the frost no longer biting her skin. The chains upon the frozen walls cracked and fell, ringing like bells. The air shifted, and for the first time in an age, a hint of warmth stirred. Mara climbed from the vault, her steps steady. As she reached the surface, the dawn was breaking. The first true dawn in living memory. The sky was pale gold above the ice, and snowmelt dripped from the tower's edge. The people of Old Town crept from their hovels to see her standing upon the tower's height, her torch blazing against the morning sky. "Winter ends," she said, her voice carrying across the silent city, "but we will remember its mercy." Then she cast the torch into the sea. Where it struck, the ice cracked, and light spread through the water like veins of fire. The sea heaved once more, and waves rose, carrying warmth upon their foam. The frost upon the land began to weep. Rivers flowed again. Trees broke through the snow, their buds trembling in the thaw. And far to the north, a sound echoed, a cry of anger or grief or both, carried on the melting wind. It was said that Mara Hightower vanished that day, though some swore they saw her walking north, a woman crowned in pale flame, leaving no prints in the softening snow. And in the deep places of the world, where ice and memory met, the last whisper of Vaegon Targaryen faded at last. Mercy is a kind of madness too. Thus ended the long winter, though in every age that followed, when snow fell strangely in spring, or the sea froze for a night, people would turn their faces north and murmur prayers to the mad prince who became the storm. Some called him Curse, others Savior, but the wise remembered his true name, Vaegon the Maester, the last dragon of ice and fire,